But this is a bring your own tools kind of overview provided by BDC on their webpage. I'm going to go ahead and go to BDC powered by 7 Bridges, and I'll kind of come back to this webpage at certain parts. Right now, if you're not familiar with BDC powered by 7 Bridges, this is the homepage. We have projects, analyses, public resources, data, and I'm not going to go into all of that today. What I'm going to go over today is how, if you have a running R script, to convert that into an app. And the same sort of workflow that we're going to use here for an R script would also work for a Python script or a batch script. And you'd be able to extend it towards that. I just chose an R script because, it's kind of what I felt like doing and I'm the most familiar with right now. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this project. I already started a data studio just because they take about 3 minutes to load. So that's what's on this second tab. But you can see that's running. And if I hadn't started it, I would just go into here and press run. The purpose of me having this data studio is to show you I have 2 scripts. I have a cohort subsetter and an upset plotting script. Both of them are R scripts and both of them are working. I'm just going to show you how these work, and then I'll show you how to make them into the individual apps. So if we type in terminal R script and then cohort subsetter, we can see that the usage statement for this, I need an input file, a variable / column name, and then a value name. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my project files, where I have my test data. And I'll just, before I do that, I'm just going to show you how this is formatted. And this is not actual test data. I kind of made mock test data, but you can imagine if you had exported variables from picture, that you would have data similar to this. So if I look at this, you can see that I just got a couple columns and I, randomly made this. But if this was a cohort, I have sex, age category, ethnicity, and education for, a set of samples. And I just made 1,000 mock samples here. So if I do this and I go, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the sex column. And I'm going to subset only females. So you can see that ran. It made a file for me here. And if I look at that file, I can see now I have subset my original file only to females. My second script here is just going to make a plot. If I go ahead and do that, you can see, oh, 1 second, forgot to install my packages. So I'm just installing the 2 packages that are actually needed to all the libraries, which I forgot to do before I started, which is fine. So if I do this now, you can see that all I need for this particular script is an input file. So I'm going to go ahead and use that input file that I just created with my other script. And if I just refresh the files, you can now see that I have a plot. So what I'm just showing you here is an example of 2 basic scripts. And now, as somebody who might be familiar with bioinformatics, you might do this in Data Studio, and that might be your happy place. But if you want to extend this to other users within your project or have a collaboration or be able to see how somebody else ran the script with like what their input was and what day they did this on and like what version of the script they were using. You can't really do that in Data Studio. And I'm using toy examples here, but also if I had a script, like these ran really quickly, right? It was like 10 seconds. But if I had a script that ran over hours, Data Studio does have a session timeout. There's a 15-minute FedRAMP, so it can kind of get, if I'm trying to do something that's going to take hours, doing it in Data Studio is not the best way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and create an app for each one of these, and then I'm going to create a workflow which takes the cohort subsetter and links it to the upset plotting so that you can do it all in one. If I go to apps, in my project, I have absolutely nothing here currently. Now, traditionally, I can add apps through my public app gallery. Apps come in two flavors. They come in tools and workflows. Tools is just going to be an individual script that does one or more things and has an input and an output, and workflows will connect multiple tools together. So I'm going to go ahead and create an app. It's going to ask me if I want a workflow or a command line tool. I'm going to go ahead and say command line tool, and we're going to call this one subsetter. I don't need that extra E. Bring your own tools. All right. So what this is going to bring up is a UI, and this UI is going to help you build a CWL, the CWL tool. So everything is going to kind of show up in code here that you do in the visual user interface. The first thing that I need to do is I need to assign a Docker for this. If I go back to my Data Studio, you can see in the console that I'm using R 4.5.1. So if I just look up Rocker, which is going to be our Dockers, you can see that like there are a lot of different versions of these. I'm only using 4.5.1 because I know that my script works in 4.5.1. There's no other reason behind this. Like if I wanted to use 4.6 or a more up-to-date version of R, I can certainly do that. But since I have this working in Data Studio with 4.5.1, that's what I'm going to go ahead and use. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up in the Docker repository. And this is just enabling my script to run in an R, using this R environment 4.5.1. It's not doing anything else that's really complicated. Now for my base command, if we go back to the editor and I go back to the terminal, and I type history, you can see exactly how I ran this R script before, R script cohort subsetter, and then file name, and then variable name, and then value name. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and put that in my base command. And it's just going to separate that into two lines, and you can see it being built on this bottom panel here. Now for input ports, if you remember back to the same place, you can see that I actually have three inputs for this script. I have a file, and then I have two strings. So I'm going to go ahead and add inputs. The first one is going to be a file. I'm going to say this is going to be my cohort file. I'm going to make this position 1 because it should be the first argument after the script name, and you can see it's being built here. And you can add a description and a label, so I'm just going to say select a cohort file. The cohort file should be tab delimited and in text or TSV format. And I'll go ahead and make the file types either a text file or a TSV file, just simply because that is how my R script was taken in a tab delimited file. So I'm going to make it so it, tells you that you need that kind of file. And this is a requirement, so I'm going to make sure it's required. I'm going to add another input, and we'll call this variable name. Instead of being a file this time, it's going to be a string. It's once again going to be required. You can see how it's automatically put this in position 0, but we want it to be our second input, so we'll put that as position 2. Label variable the column / variable name. And I'm just writing a quick description for this. Please ensure spelling is correct, and this corresponds to a column in the cohort file. All right, and then we'll add a value. This is going to be required again. It is going to be a string. It's going to be position 3 because it's the third argument. And we're just going to put value, name, and I'm just going to put description here. Okay. So I have my 3 inputs. For my output port, I know that I'm going to get a text or a TSV file out, depending on if I gave it a text or a TSV file to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and say add output, and I'm just going to put statements here, star.tsv, which will grab anything that has TSV at the end. And I'll set multiple patterns and do star.text. Right? I can add some hints here if I want to. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want this to run on a particular instance type. So I'll just select a small instance, and I'll only give it 100 gigabytes because this is not going to take that, much. And then what's important here is my file requirements. I'm going to select a file. If I go back to my data studio, this is the file I'm going to want to actually select. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that whole thing. Put the file contents here, and then make sure that you match your name here with the file name. And if you did want to edit anything in here kind of live, you can. And you can see we get nice little syntax highlighting, and it will automatically, recognize that this is an R file and do syntax highlighting for that. If it was a Python file, it would do the same, and it kind of renders it down here. And just another thing to note is you can see in my actual script that I have the arguments, this is the second argument, that is the third argument, this is the first argument, and that's why I have them ordered as I have them down here. Right, I don't think I forgot anything. So I will go ahead and save this, and we can put a revision note. I'm just going to say this is my initial attempt to make this app. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go back and go to my tasks. Sorry, my apps. I'm going to go ahead and press run. You can see that because I set these as required, I have this red text here saying that I basically have to specify something. If I try to run this without specifying, it won't work. I'm going to select my test data 2. And let's make the column / variable name sex again. And we'll make this female. I'm going to press run. So this is going to get queued, and then it's going into running state. While that's happening, let's build our second app, and then we'll look at and make sure that it actually worked and that I didn't miss anything. So I'm going to go ahead and create app again. Command line tool. We'll call this upset flutter. Bring your own tool. I'm going to do this in the same way as before, but one thing I want to note is that I have to do something slightly different, which is if you remember back to the beginning, I had not installed those packages. You can't install a package within an app. You have to call a Docker that actually has that package already installed. And so I have pre-made a Docker already and pushed that to the platform. I can see that if I go here to my developer and go to Docker registry, I have already pushed this here. And this is basically just a Docker that has R 4.5.1, but has the tool. Let me get back here. It just has these packages already installed, and it calls ggplot 3.5.2 specifically. So that's what's in my Docker. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this and go ahead to paste that in my Docker repository and just do it from the images part instead. My base command I can get again from my command from here, rscript upset plotting.r. Add base command. Right, my input ports, this is only going to take a file, so this is a little bit simpler than before. And I'm just going to make that position 1, so it's my first argument, and we can put a description that is cohort file and description. All right, and we're once again expecting it to be a text file or a TSV. My output ports, this was creating a PNG file. So instead of having a star.txt or star.csv, I'm just going to have a star.png, and that'll grab any PNG file. Yeah, I did. Good call. Thank you for noticing that. And hint, I can once again say that I want AW. I can put an instance type in here. So 100, and then file requirements again. We'll have the file. I will go back to my data studio. I will copy this whole thing. And once again, like, you know, you have the syntax highlighting, and you can see that that first argument is my file. Okay, and I do not think I need anything else here. That was required. Good. Okay, so I'll save this as initial attempt. All right, let's go back. And let's attempt to run this app, and then we'll see if I correctly set up the first one or not. Looks like I did because there is a file there, so I'll go ahead and save that selection, and we'll run that. So let's go back to our tasks. We could see that the first app that I set up, I attempted it one time, it worked, it went to completion. Just because something goes to completion, though, doesn't necessarily mean it actually works, so let's see if it did. Once again, this took in a cohort file, it took in a column/variable name, and it took in a value name. And we can see that I got my output here. And I can look at the raw view, and I can see that, yes, indeed, this is just kind of females in my file. And so like this worked as I was expecting. The thing here that we're trying to get across is that the conversion from a Data Studio working R script to an app shouldn't be this huge hurdle for people. And the nice thing about this now that I've run this is like I have a file, it's associated with a specific task. If I go to my files, like this is associated with a specific task. So I will always be able to tie this back to this specific task, where I will always be able to see what my input was, what my app settings were. And this can get very complicated, right? Like if I had an app that took in multiple file types, it took in multiple settings, and it had multiple outputs, I could always tie this back to a specific instance and a specific run. And that's really important because when you're trying to make things reproducible over time, in a data studio, you can kind of just do it, and maybe you're trying something and you're plotting something for the first time. But here I can actually tie this really cleanly back to what I was doing. Let's see if my other task has run yet. It is running now. So while this is running, I'm going to show you how to make a workflow just to kind of get across that this is not this big hurdle. And I think, more people really should be trying to use this even for simpler apps, because then anybody can run it. I can copy this to a new project and somebody can run it too. So I'm going to go ahead and create an app. I'm going to assume that my second one is going to work, which is probably not the best assumption, but we only do have 30 minutes here. So I'm going to call this subset. Upset plot. And this time I'm selecting workflow instead of command line tool because I'm going to connect two of these together. This is going to allow me to drag and drop apps that I've created from any of my projects or public apps as well. So I'm just going to double click on here. I have my subsetter. I have my upset plot. I'm going to pull out this select cohort file. That's going to allow me to actually see it. I'm going to decide that I don't actually want to see that subset file, or maybe I do, maybe I still want it to make it, but I also want it to directly go into the subset plotter, and then I want that output to get out. And then one other thing I need to do is I need to double click on this first one, and by default for your app parameters, it's going to assume that you want defaults, but I didn't actually set any defaults for my column and variable slash variable name or my value name. And in this context, it doesn't make sense. So I'm just going to put these as exposed, and that allows it to still take in a value versus just assuming you want the default. And there's other things you can kind of do in here, like I can go up here and I can set hints, and I can choose the instance type again. Since I did that already for these individual apps, I'm not going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and save this and say initial attempt. And let's go back and see if my task ran, because if it failed for some reason, I don't necessarily want to run the workflow. Okay, so that completed, and I'll get back to that in 1 second, but let me run this app and then kind of go through. I think that is because I went to that hint and then I did nothing with it. So let me just actually add the hint. Yeah, that's because I didn't trash that hint. Okay, and let me go ahead and run this. So I'll select my cohort one. Column name, I'll do sex again, but this time let's get male. And I'll run that. So while that's running, you can see that my second app that I made really quickly while we were online, here, ran to completion. And I got my, little PNG file here. And then what's going to look different for the workflow is that, let me go to apps, is you're going to be able to see kind of each tool within your workflow. So you can imagine some of these are quite, big. They might be an entire pipeline. And in this one, I did output the output from the subsetter, but I also passed it directly to the tool. A nice thing about workflows is that you don't have to write out these intermediate files. So like, I don't need to write out this subset text file. I could pass it directly from here to here. And that means that I don't then have to pay storage for those intermediates. And so that's a really good way to not have a bunch of intermediate files kind of build up within your project over time, is to have workflows that just pass files from one tool to the other. And I didn't do this here, but you can kind of add descriptions. You can, tell people how to run this. You can have performance benchmarking. Any one of our public apps is going to have like all of these very long descriptions. Let me see if I can just go look at one. Like descriptions, required inputs, outputs. And so you can really make these workflows and tools so that anybody can use them. And you can work with our bioinformatics to make them public so that like really anybody can use them, but also your collaborators, you can directly share them with even before that. So let's go back, and this may not be done by the time we're done with the webinar, but that's okay. I don't know if there's any questions anybody has in chat, but I think this should only take like a minute or two to run.
We don't have any questions in chat at the moment, so I think you're good to go.
Okay. But I think kind of in summary, what we're trying to show here is like, it's really easy to take an R script that's working already and make it into an app. It makes it much more extendable and flexible for future use. And it makes it really easy for you then to be able to track down where these files that you made came from and how you made them, which is really nice. And then if you do run into issues, those are also kind of like logged over time. So you can go and you can see, like error logs. So I can go to my instance metrics and I can see kind of how much CPU and disk and RAM everything took. And I can go and look at my tasks logs and I can see if there's actual errors that are occurring and kind of track those back through this as well. And this did complete. So we can see like I got the same output, except this time it's male. So I guess it's not exactly the same output. but I correctly got males, and I now have a new plot that is just the cohort with males. So in summary, please make apps, and tools and workflows are really great. We do provide office hours support if you guys ever want to come and kind of troubleshoot with us, and definitely use these kinds of resources to make your research more reproducible in the future.